All right, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, a very special interview. I know a lot of you have been waiting for this. This is Mario Buildreps. This is, in fact, his pen name. But he has some brilliant discoveries on ancient pole positions, and he came to these conclusions not as a geologist, but independently as a mathematician and apparently a statistician. But he put together, I believe, the orientations of ancient megalithic structures, and he came to a very startling conclusion that they all align with different pole positions in antiquity. So it's a pleasure to have you on the show, Mario. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Diamond.
All right, so give us some background. We were just talking about this, but for the audience, what made you start to look at this, and when did you come up with the first discovery that these pole positions existed?
Oh, it started a very long time ago. When I was still a child, I was very interested in Neanderthals and megalithic structures. And my grandfather was an archaeologist and a professor in the Old Testament, the Old Bible. And he went to Egypt and Israel and did all kinds of diggings and studies. And he also was one of the few people who knew to translate cuneiform script. And it was very special at the time. There's a fly here in me.
Yes, I just saw that.
The only fly in the house is circling around. And then so I was very interested in the old times of humans. Where did humans come from? How did they evolve? What happened to humanity? Why they suddenly start to build civilizations only after hundreds of thousands of years living on this planet? What happened suddenly that they started to evolve and to culturize? And this is an interesting question, of course, because we all know the stories about Iron Age, Bronze Age, and the Stone Age, and we learned this at school. And this is, of course, fascinating. When you go to, for example, megalithic structures and you walk around, you see these large stones. You think, how did they do this? These immense structures with no tools. And so this, when I was still a child, I wanted to be an archaeologist or a geologist, but I became a technician, a mathematician, an engineer, and so on. So I started to have a career in this direction. And how did I come to this research? My life started to change about 10 years ago. Then I had a difficult divorce, and I started to think about the meaning of life. I started to remember my interest as a child, and I started to research, and I stumbled upon interesting questions, and I started to see patterns. And these patterns also accumulated to an interesting question about why is there an ice sheet on Greenland? Because this is a scientific interesting question where no scientist has the answer of. Why is it there? And most people think, because it is very northerly situated. But this is also the case with Canada and Russia and Scandinavia. So why are there no ice sheets on these continents at all? And so it's a sort of combination of questions that I had and was interest that started to focus slowly into one direction. And I stumbled upon Charles Hapgood's work, of course, very interesting. And I read his book about pole shift, path of the pole. And it was initially published in the 50s. It's about 70 years ago. And at that time, it was very controversial, of course. And it is still a very controversial terrain after 70 years, this idea. And when I saw Hapgood's timelines, yes, thank you, Diamond. There it is. It's great work. It's marvelous. But also, it is when you look at Hapgood's work and the sudden shift of the poles, you think, these are shifts of geographic poles. And when I go to, for example, the pyramids of Giza, I see they are currently oriented. So if Charles Hapgood's work would be true, theory would be true, there might be pyramids or temples oriented to Charles Hapgood's poles. This is the first line of thought that I had. So I started to research this, but I didn't find it. There was no correlation between orientations and Charles Hapgood's work. So this first discouraged me. Thought this is all bullshit, Charles Hapgood's work. And then I stumbled upon weird correlations between this is the globe on pyramids on the eastern and western hemisphere. They accumulated on a very small point on Greenland. I thought that's fascinating because Charles Hapgood's work also focuses on this Greenland pole. And it is indeed, it seems to be true that ancient structures are focusing on this Greenland pole. And so I started to dig further and further. And so I started to make a database of orientations and locations of ancient structures. And I initially started with the most famous pyramids of Teotihuacan and Giza, of course, and then China. And so it slowly starts to build up over the years. First 50 pyramids, and then 100, and then 300, and then 600, and now it's almost 1,200 ancient structures in the database. And it's interesting, when you start with 50, you start to see a pattern. You think, it's interesting. It already starts to focus on certain points. And when your theory isn't true and your database grows, it must start to fade out, this pattern. But it didn't happen. It started to narrow down even more and even more and even more. So this encouraged me to dig deeper and deeper. And I was working day and night, and I had opportunity to be free as a researcher, not to have a job. So I could spend 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, working on this theory. And it is, I want to. Sorry.
Let me just jump in. Let me guess. You had access to Google Earth and a good computer, and you were getting these orientations by spending hours finding this. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And a lot of people were doing that about 10 years ago when they had access to that first Google Earth.
Yeah, it's because it's mighty difficult terrain, because you can draw a few lines on Google Earth, and it starts to be fuzzy and strange, and you don't see any pattern anymore. And you at a certain point you need advanced math to make something of it. And I want to correct one thing, and it's about not all pyramids focus on these points, because that's what some people think, that all pyramids are. It's not true. About 60% focus on these red dots, you see, these 5 red dots, and about 40% are in between. So it means that not all pyramids are built oriented to these clusters. And
okay, but do they fall in between the dots?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
So right there is excellent evidence that whatever's happening here, whatever's causing it appears that the Earth is rolling slightly each time. Yeah. And whatever's causing that isn't necessarily instantaneous, because there's some periods in between.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Hapgood's work is still excellent. but I do not believe that the crust can in its totality tumble over, because you have enormous troubles in your theory explaining some things, like, for example, Antarctica would on the equator or somewhere, so it would melt and sea levels would rise. There's no evidence for this. So what my work suggests is that Antarctica was on its place, on its current position, almost exactly the same position. It's still a little bit moved over time, but at the North Pole, the geographic North Pole, migrated, and so you can only explain this in one way, that is a heavy deformation of the crust, so not tumbling over, deformation, and which I make very fast jumps, because I have, of course, spent hours, years and years researching this. And this jump that I make is that there's only one possible mechanism explaining this, and that is expansion of the Earth. And this is, of course, also controversial terrain. So this is controversial upon a controversial. So this puts me almost instantaneously in a pseudoscience corner. It's okay for me. I have mathematics for me to back up.
Well, it's funny because I didn't know that you were into expansion tectonics, and that's something I've been a proponent of that for decades. So fascinating.
It's definitely true, and you can see the evidence on the ocean floor, the isochrons. When you look at the isochrons, you see, of course, a perfect fit of South America and Africa. They join together, and you see the isochrons patterns expanding. And when you tumble the Earth over and you look at the Pacific, you think, what might have happened there? Because if Pangea is correct and the Earth had the same diameter, then the Pacific must have shrunk in size. But you see the same isochronic pattern, of course not the same, but you see a similar isochronic pattern in the Pacific, and it's also expansion, similar as in the Atlantic. So how can you explain these isochrons in the Atlantic to be expansion and in the Pacific to be shrinking? This is illogical.
Well, and this is fantastic because it helps explain hundreds of paradoxes going through geologic time. First of all, in the Carboniferous, we're talking around 250 million years ago, we have 8-foot dragonflies. We have ferns that are 300 feet high and some trees that are actually a quarter of a mile high. Lepidodendron could have been this high. And the atmosphere today wouldn't allow for that but if the Earth was smaller and our atmosphere was thicker, well, this would be like a greenhouse, and we would have much thicker columns of lower atmosphere and upper atmosphere. And it also explains the change in gravity. Like a dinosaur couldn't exist on our current Earth because blood wouldn't be able to pump up to his brain. So this would be able to explain all of those paradoxes.
Absolutely. And when you look at, for example, the T-Rex, we see movies within a few days. A new movie about Jurassic Park will come out in the cinema, and you see these T-Rex running around. And it's of course crazy. It's impossible for this T-Rex, for this dynamic. It's especially buckling, and buckling is difficult. It's mathematically difficult. Well, but for example, I'm a Dutchman, so sometimes I throw in Dutch words. For example, an ostrich can run around, and you can calculate the stresses on its bones, especially the buckling bones, the buckling forces. And when you do the same with a T-Rex, these bones will buckle even before he touches the ground with his feet, almostly. So it doesn't explain. It's something not right here. So it needs more And when I think about geology, it's special. You are also trained geologist, Diamond, I think.
Yes, field geologist. So I actually know of and seen rocks, and I actually have been to thousands of sites around the world. So
yeah, and when I thought about this, an uncle of me is also a geologist, and he's very convinced of his belief, let's say, or that he's right in his ideas. And I say to him, yes, but you have you are trained to think in this in this chart of Jurassic and Triassic and all these subdivisions, and you have to learn them. You have to learn them, put them in your brain as a fixed idea. It's very difficult to learn this in the right order and so on. Am I right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. And when you
And so when you start learning as a geologist, you're indoctrinated into the textbook they're teaching you from. And luckily, my mentors, the professors I worked under, were not uniformitarianists. They were catastrophists. So I got to learn uniformitarianism at university, but my professors were teaching catastrophic geology to me and others in the field, because the only thing you see is catastrophic geology in every quarry. You don't see uniformitarianism. You can make up the story of uniformitarianism in your head, but it does not show up in a quarry. What happens in a quarry is that there is a cycle after cycle after cycle of catastrophe, and it's been going on for the entire time Earth has been here. Now, what's driving that mechanism is something that no one knows, but in the 80s, they came up with the Milankovitch and the precession of the equinoxes, and somehow the wobble was doing it. But then again, that's bad math, and all it really is astrology. So the precession of the equinoxes and the great year, it proves that ancient cultures knew that our Earth did precess by looking at the heavens.
Yeah. Sure.
And then you get the glaciologists, and when we get the graphs, right, and they try to force ice ages on these graphs. But what they don't tell you is what every 104,000 years, we have a change on Earth so catastrophic, it's unexplainable. No one has a mechanism for the temperature changing 22 degrees C in 1,000 years. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. And they seem to leave out that 104,000 year cycle, which is a very big cycle. I mean, everyone's talking about the 26,000 year precession cycle, but what is the last one was the 104,000 year cycle, Mario. You agree with me on that, right? It wasn't just a 26,000 year cycle.
It's somewhat more nuanced. You can our viewers see this picture on the screen of this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You see on the down right corner, you see this graph of green and red. It's perhaps a little bit small for the viewers.
I could blow it up.
Can you blow it up?
I'm going to try.
Can try. Yeah, it's just it's a premiere. Yeah, that looks great.
How's that?
Right. Yeah, perfect.
Oh man, we can get even bigger.
Oh, it's perfect. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Let's work with that.
It looks great. You see this green and red bars.
Absolutely.
And they are projected upon the glacial cycles. It's not perfectly 104,000 years. So, for example, according to my theory, the last migration of the North Pole, geographic North Pole, stopped about 26,000 years ago. And then the biosphere started to recuperate from this catastrophe. And we see this as a bouncing up in the glaciers from Antarctica. And when you go further to the left, so you see A, B, C, D, E.
So is the green bar the recovery time?
No, it's quite difficult. I worked on this for a few years to make this perfectly fit based on all the orientations. I myself, I'm pointing on the screen. It looks a bit stupid. You see these green bars? These are let's say, the natural temperature variations of the Earth, of the atmosphere. This is approximately 2.8 degrees. And these red bars in between, these A, B, C, D, E, these are the deformation cycles. And they perfectly fit on the distances of the poles. And I, of course, as a math-trained engineer, can calculate the probability for this fit to be coincidental. And this is incredibly, incredibly small to be coincidence.
So they also correspond to massive temperature reduction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that if there's massive deformation on the Earth, even if it's a slight slip, because what it looks like is there could be some slight crustal slip only in one direction as it's rolling. You're going to get movement on the asthenosphere. And this is the crustal boundary. So you're going to have, even though you may have some small mountain building events happening, but you're going to have massive volcanic activity, which is going to cool the Earth. If you pump dust into the atmosphere, the Earth gets very cold because there's no more sun. And then it puts, huge pressure on plant and animal species, and then you get major glaciations.
Yeah, you get major die-offs and starvation, of course, of large populations and animals, of course.
Have you tried to correlate major volcanic events with those red lines?
Not yet. But what I see is that some people suggest that the next glaciation is coming. Because you see this in the graph. When you look at this graph, you see,
I suggest it.
Yeah, next glaciation is coming. But of course, this timeline goes over hundreds of thousands of years. So this next glaciation is coming, but it is not coming tomorrow. It will be coming in the next few thousand years, and it slowly starts to be worse and worse. And what I see, and I guess you and many of the viewers can also notice, is that volcanic activity has grown over the last few hundred years, and also seismic activity. Seismic activity also increased over the last few centuries. So this suggests that the process is started of expansion very slowly over thousands of years. And so humanity and all sorts of animals will start to slowly, how do you call this? We call this uitsterving. I know the Dutch word.
Evolve?
No, not evolve, just dying, slowly dying.
Oh, extinction.
Extinction, yeah, thanks. So slow process of extinction. We will see this happening not over centuries or years, but over thousands of years. And when NASA would be measuring very accurately, you will see that the Earth definitely expands over a century, over the time of a century. And when you roll this over many thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, you would see that the Earth expands. I'm quite sure of this.
So it's interesting that you have, because when I say the 104,000 year cycle, I'm talking about the high spike interglacials.
Yeah, sure.
But there is a uniquely long cycle, which includes your C and B. So, and this explains those major drop-offs. It's quite fascinating. But what the viewer should glean from this is that on these huge rises in temperature, this is literally the flexure point. This is where most of the mass extinctions occurred.
Yep.
So during the Younger Dryas event, we had a die-off of 65% of the megafauna on the entire planet. Africa, some of them lived on Africa. So clearly Africa is like a protected area from this whatever the catastrophe is, the shift.
Africa is relatively protected. Yeah, sure.
And we can see that in the archaeology. If you look on Google Earth, you can see very ancient structures, hundreds of thousands of them all over Africa.
Yeah, that's correct. I think because the Earth expands. When you, Diamond, we can perhaps go to, I have an article on the website.
Okay.
Perhaps we can go to this. It's called, when you go back to our research and then to Earth Sciences, you see, do you find it?
I just got to find your website.
Okay. MarioBuildreps.com.
I thought I had it up here.
Just be calm. The viewers are
there we go.
Are patient.
Okay, where are we going? Our research,
Earth Science, and then go to the Growing Earth Model. Can you find it? The fourth Earth Science. Here the rooster.
Whoa. Should we play the video?
Yeah, sure. When you look at this video, it's normally this is projected on a flat plane. And when you look at the South Pole, you'll see Antarctica. It has a ring of expansion. And this is interesting. And so it means that when you talk about, it doesn't play perfectly well.
I have to go to it, so that's all I have to do.
Okay.
And
That's
then
okay like that. Just because it's okay like this.
Okay.
It doesn't have to rotate and turn. Just leave it like this. It's okay.
Yeah.
When you look at Antarctica, you see this ring of expansion, this red circle around Antarctica. And when the Earth, you don't see this on a flat plane, but when you project it on a sphere, which I did, you perfectly see this pushing of Antarctica upward. And it might also explain why most of the continents are in the northern hemisphere, because Antarctica is pushing them all away from itself. And it centers itself around the South Pole. And this is why Antarctica, where I believe Antarctica is still over a very long time in ice. And this is not the case with Greenland.
Well, what about the Piri-Reis map?
That's an interesting one. I don't know, but it must come from old ancient knowledge, this map, somehow.
Yeah, because in fact, we did have the Holocene optimum around 8,000, 9,000 years ago. It was much warmer. Sea level was 110 feet higher. There was almost no glacial ice, or none. And that could have been a time, and that's only 8,000 years ago, that there could be no ice on the coast of Antarctica because the oceans would warm so much, kind of like the West Coast effect on the US, like San Francisco never gets freezing, that the coast could have melted and the ice could have been pushed inland in just a few hundred years because of warm ocean breezes. And then you could have people living on the coast, and then that would rapidly end during a small shift.
Maybe, but I think we are a little bit thinking in short time frames of 8,000 years and so on. Perhaps we have to teach ourselves to expand our brain a little bit more into ideas of 100,000 years, 200,000 years, because civilizations are here on Earth already for a very long time, very long time.
I just think it's hard to keep a map to the last interglacial that would have been warm enough is 104,000 years ago. And that's a long time to keep a map.
Yeah, sure. It's a long time to keep a map, but also it would be interesting to we don't know where this map comes from. Perhaps it is redrawn from knowledge. Perhaps it is redrawn from a stone map, or I don't know. But it must come from somewhere. And 8,000 years is already too long for a map to keep.
So guys, I just want to, for the people watching, go on this graphic we're showing, what he pointed out there, and if you don't understand what he was saying there, is that Antarctica, which is below the South Pole picture there, is surrounded by a red line. Do you guys see that red line? It goes all the way around the continent. Those are mid-ocean ridges, which are expansion plate boundaries. And these are proven in the 50s when they drug the first magnet across the ocean floor, that there are different polarities on both sides that match, which clearly showing expansion here. And I never saw this, Mario. This is fascinating, that the entire continent of Antarctica is surrounded by these expansion plate boundaries.
Yeah, yeah. So it suggests that Antarctica is virtually the only continent that is stable, the most stable. Let's say this like this: the most stable continent, and so. And this,
well, that's where all the secret bases are.
Sure. If they are there, they must be there. Yeah, sure. If they are really, if they are real, they must be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Covered in ice.
Guys, we're looking at Mario's website. It is Antiquity Reborn. There will be links below to it. You can get links to everything that Mario does, his research, the background history, his Patreon page, more importantly, where you can donate to his work. Mario is very altruistic as a scientist here. He's doing this for no other reason than to get to the bottom of the truth. Isn't that correct, Mario?
Yeah, you say this very correctly. I'm very interested in the truth and not in anything else, but the truth. So.
Now, I saw on your website that maybe you guys are preparing a book. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm writing a book, and I started to write in English, but my English, because English is not my native language, I stopped this process. I got help from a friend, and but I'm limited in my creative writing, so I started again in Dutch, and I will be finishing this book in Dutch. It will be very interesting. Of course, I will cover much more than we are talking about now, because there's so much to know about, for example, when an archaeologist starts to dig for an ancient structure, an ancient ruin, he is digging, for example, in Iraq or Iran or Israel for many meters below the current ground level. But we all know that soil doesn't build up very quickly in these areas. So,
if you just look at the moai that Thor Heyerdahl unearthed on Easter Island back in 1986, he dug down 62 feet. Now, based on current depositional levels on Easter Island, that would have to be sitting there for 20,000 years to be buried in that much. Yeah. Or there would have to be, dozens of cataclysms to bury it, floods. And so, but no one wants to address it because it's taboo.
It's taboo. Yes, absolutely. And I also understand this, because when you are, let's say, government or scientist community, then you have a little bit to protect your domain. It's a normal human behavior that you protect your domain. And what is this protection about is that you don't want to throw out everything away and destroy everything you've done over the last years. It would be illogical. So it takes time for these paradigm changes to evolve. And I think society is ready for this slow process of becoming conscious that humans are intelligent all these hundreds of thousands of years, and that we are still the same humans as we were 200,000 years ago.
Or 400,000.
400,000, yes, definitely.
Yeah. And I've been saying this for years, that Cro-Magnon has the ability, and has since it first was a species, to be and do exactly what you and I are doing right now.
Yeah.
It's just that they have a little problem here on planet Earth. We have cataclysms, and we have big ones.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
And these are so big that they erase almost everything except, let's say, a couple of blocks in Sacsayhuaman or in Pumapunku or the pyramids.
A few tribes survive this because they are prepared. For example, you see this example in Derinkuyu in Turkey. Mm-hmm. It's an underground city, and there are, of course, many more underground cities. So our people are prepared for these cataclysms when they see this coming.
Yeah, I believe that the whole Druidic knowledge, the Druids they're passing on, because they know of the cataclysmos, that each of the Druids had to know everything that is known. Yeah. And just in case they're the only one that makes it.
You say this perfectly well, because this is secret knowledge passed on to Druids and to priests orders. They know this, it is coming, so we must prepare for this. And let's say it's a sort of Elon Musk idea. We must go to Mars because there will be a cataclysm coming.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. But it doesn't come. I don't want to panic the audience, because it is not coming tomorrow or next year.
No, I explained to them, because in geologic time, instantaneous geologic time could be 2,000 years, that it's a slow train wreck. The things slowly accumulate and change. And then there could be a tipping point where large eruptions happen. If you have a few VEI 7s, the sky is going to get dark for a few years, and then that will change everything instantly.
It will become difficult to how do you say, to make prepare food, to grow food and
grow food, which we do here.
So you will get starvation, and we live with so many people on the earth. So we have problems and riots and violence, and so slowly people will diminish over time, and only a few tribes will survive, because they know it is coming. We are prepared. We are strong, and we will be preparing for this event. And so it's good to have this knowledge and to prepare for this, of course, but not tomorrow. You must prepare this as a society, not as a person, not as an ego preparing for this. We have to prepare for this as a species.
Yeah, indeed. Mario, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We need to pick this back up and get into more specifics, and we'll prepare better for it, so that we can kind of guide the listener through your work, which is complex for some, and you and I can work it out. It's been fascinating. Guys, if you want to check out Mario's work, Antiquity Reborn, we'll have links to the website below. If you want to donate, you just click on Become a Patreon, and you can help his work out there. Mario also has a YouTube page, Mario Buildreps, and let's all subscribe there. There will be links in the description for that, and let's get him over 5,000 subs. Mario, do you have any parting words?
Thank you very much. I would like to see you the next time, and I'm also very interested in the ideas of the viewers, of course.
Yeah, so comment below if you like what we're talking about, or you don't like what we're talking about. And Mario, we could pick this up and do it regularly if you're down, like in a week or so.
Yeah, possibly. I'm very busy. I have to say this, because I have more interviews to do, and I do this in my spare time. I have to do research and writing and working and other things. So next week is a little bit too fast, but
will you just send me a timeline, and we'll get it done?
Perhaps in what do you think about a month? What is
perfect?
Yeah,
we'll marinate on this.
Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure having you, Mario. Keep up the good work.
Okay. Bye, Diamond. Bye. Thank you.